There's nobody else that wanted to bring her home more than we did.
On the evening of June 7, 1992, Springfield, Missouri, was shaken by the sudden disappearance of three women: Cheryl Levitt, her daughter Susie Streeter, and Susie's best friend Stacy McCall.
Yep.
They had just attended Susie's high school graduation, a moment that should have been filled with celebration and joy. Instead, it became the beginning of a chilling mystery that remains unsolved to this day. The night began like any other, with the girls enjoying their time together after the graduation ceremony. But after the celebrations, Susie, Stacy, and Cheryl were never seen again. Janelle Kirby, a close friend of Susie's, wished she had stopped them from leaving that night. Looking back, I wish I'd begged them to stay and not let them leave. We should have just slept on the floor together, she confessed, haunted by the thought that maybe things would have been different if they had stayed. The next morning, Janelle woke up to find no phone calls from her friends, which was unusual. Growing concerned, she attempted to contact Susie and Stacy, but there was no answer. Eventually, she went to their home to check on them, only to be greeted by an eerie scene. The porch light was shattered, but the bulb was still intact, and when Janelle entered the house, she found everything oddly silent. This was just the beginning of an investigation that would unfold more questions than answers. Timeline: the events following the graduation night were both unsettling and confusing. Janelle Kirby, who had been in close contact with Susie and Stacy, was the first to notice something was wrong. After several failed attempts to reach them by phone, Janelle decided to go to their house. What she found was enough to send chills down her spine. As she approached the front porch, Janelle was immediately struck by a strange sight. The globe covering the porch light was shattered, yet the light bulb itself was intact. It was a puzzling detail, one that seemed out of place and hinted at something unusual happening right before they vanished. Janelle, now growing more anxious, entered the house, calling out for Susie and Stacy, but there was no response. The house was eerily quiet. Inside, everything appeared to be in its usual place, but it was clear that something wasn't right. Cheryl's dog, Cinnamon, was acting agitated, barking nonstop as if sensing danger. And then there were the cigarettes and lighters, items that both Susie and Cheryl always carried with them, left behind on the table. Janelle knew this wasn't typical behavior for either of them. With growing concern, Janelle immediately contacted Stacy's mother, Janice McCall, who then rushed over to the house. When she arrived, she also called out for the girls, but there was still no answer. The situation was becoming increasingly alarming, and Janice made the decision to contact the police. The investigation was now officially underway, but little did they know, this would be the beginning of a complex and haunting mystery. Theories as the days passed with no sign of Susie, Cheryl, or Stacy. The police and families were left grappling with the same question: what happened to them? Theories began to emerge, but no one could agree on what had actually transpired. With no signs of a break-in or struggle, it seemed as though the women had simply vanished into thin air. One of the first theories was that the women might have run away. It was suggested that the stress of graduation and the uncertainty of their futures might have caused them to leave voluntarily. However, this theory seemed unlikely to many who knew them. Susie and Stacy had close families, and both were extremely responsible, so the idea that they would just disappear without a trace didn't add up. Another theory suggested foul play, but there was no evidence of forced entry into the house or a struggle. The strange shattered porch light, the barking dog, and the missing cigarettes and lighters pointed towards something being amiss, but no definitive signs of a crime were found at the scene. In the absence of concrete evidence, suspicion began to fall on people from the women's lives, but there were no obvious suspects. Investigators turned their attention to Robert Craig Cox, a man with a criminal history who had been involved in a previous crime years earlier. Some believed he might have been the perpetrator, though his alibi and lack of physical evidence cleared him as a suspect. As the investigation continued, it became clear that no theory could fully explain the mysterious disappearance of these three women. The case had more questions than answers, and with each new lead that went nowhere, the mystery only deepened. Possible accident. As time went on, investigators began to consider another possibility. Could the women have been involved in some sort of accident? Springfield, Missouri, is surrounded by dense woods and rolling hills, and it wasn't impossible that they could have gotten lost or had an unfortunate encounter with the terrain. One theory suggested that the women may have driven somewhere and experienced car trouble. It was possible they had parked on a rural road, gotten out of the car, and somehow ended up lost in the wilderness, unable to find their way back. The lack of any evidence at their home didn't rule out the possibility that they might have gone somewhere on their own, only to encounter something unexpected. Another twist to the possible accident theory was the idea of a car crash. Could they have gotten into an accident and in a state of panic fled the scene? The theory seemed more plausible when considering that no one had heard from the women and there were no signs of their car being found. However, authorities could not find any evidence of a crash, nor were there any reports from nearby areas. Despite searching the woods for weeks, no trace of the women was discovered, leading investigators to question whether an accident was the cause. The lack of physical evidence, no tire tracks, no crash, and no personal items found in the woods, left the case still in limbo. The mystery of what happened to Susie, Cheryl, and Stacy continued to baffle authorities, leaving everyone to wonder, was it truly an accident, or was there something far more sinister at play? Mystery unsolved as the years passed. The case of Cheryl Levitt, Susie Streeter, and Stacy McCall became a haunting enigma that left more questions than answers. Despite countless tips, extensive searches, and numerous leads, the women's disappearance remained unsolved. Each year that passed only deepened the sorrow and uncertainty for their families. Over 5,000 tips were logged, investigators followed leads across 21 states, and search parties combed through the dense woods of the Ozarks. But there was still no trace of the women. The police even went as far as investigating Robert Craig Cox, a man with a troubling criminal past. Yet no solid evidence connected him to the case. His statements about the women being dead left investigators and the public unnerved, but he was never proven to be involved. With no new suspects and no physical evidence, the investigation seemed to stall, and the case grew colder by the year. For the families, the pain of not knowing was unbearable. Janice McCall, Stacy's mother, said it best, "I just recently realized that she's been gone longer than I had her." The grief and loss never subsided, and each anniversary of their disappearance felt like a new wound that reopened. Nearly 19 years after the women vanished, the community of Springfield was left with a sense of haunting uncertainty. The truth of what happened to Cheryl, Susie, and Stacy remained elusive, and as the years wore on, it seemed more and more unlikely that the mystery would ever be solved. The case remained one of Springfield's most chilling unsolved mysteries, leaving behind an ache in the hearts of those who loved them. The disappearance of Cheryl Levitt, Susie Streeter, and Stacy McCall remains one of the most chilling mysteries in Springfield, Missouri. What do you think happened to them? Could it have been a tragic accident, or is there something darker at play? Share your thoughts in the comments below! Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more real-life mysteries. And stay tuned for our next video, The Disappearance of Lauren Spearer, Still No Clues, coming soon.